Hey everyone, welcome back to the show. That's Effin Weird. Today we are going to be talking about a particular seer known as Nostradamus. Starting this off, you have our host, me, Leo.
I'm Alex.
I'm Ro.
And I'm Tristan.
And as mentioned, today we're going to be talking about prophecies, but more specifically, the ones connected to Nostradamus. I'm sure everyone's familiar with prophecies, especially in the world ones. People talk about those throughout all the years. But today we're going to be tackling a French astrologer and physician notorious for having made prophecies that reportedly came true. He went by different names. I believe it's Michel de Notre Dame or Michel de Notre Dame. He was born on December 14th, 1503 in France. So Sagittarius, interesting little fact there. And he had reportedly died. It's either July 1st or July 2nd in 1566. Not sure why they're unsure of the exact day, but yeah. So he was only 63 when he passed away, which I guess was a fair age back then. But nowadays it's like, well, 63, that's relatively young.
Leo, what year was he born?
Yeah, so he was born in 1503. So I think like during the times of the Renaissance and everything, and the plague and all of that insanity going on.
Okay.
And I think what made him so popular is the fact that he was, popular during the times of the Renaissance. So, they had like a whole bunch of creative talents and extravagant inventions and just all kinds of like out of the extraordinary things going on. So I think that's what like he was, there at the right time, so to say.
Yeah, people really liked weird stuff during that period.
Oh yeah. So funny enough, he actually started off doing a medical practice in Agen, which was a town in southwestern France, home of a lot of scholars at the time. And sometime in 1530s, he was actually kicked out from medical school, so he never actually got his degree, but was still, of course, doing his practice. And so after a while, he had made a move to, I believe it's Ceylon, about 10 years later, and that's when he had started to gain renown for innovative treatments during the plague outbreaks. Shortly after dealing with the outbreak and everything in 1547, that's when he had started to get into his prophecies, and he had released a book called Centuries in 1555. And these consist of what were called quatrains, which is basically like just 4-line poems. And that's a bit of a debate as far as the accuracy of that, but we'll get into that a little later. But as time went on, his prophecies supposedly came true, and of course, they went under a lot of critique, and a lot of scholars and everybody, nowadays question the legitimacy of the prophecies he's made.
What were some of the first ones that he made that came true?
So some of them, some of his more famous ones was the Great Fire of London, which he had stated the year it happened was 1666. The French Revolution, talked about Napoleon, Hitler, and I actually have that one here. Prophecy goes that from the depths of the west of Europe, a young child will be born of poor people. And what does this child do? He will, by his tongue, seduce a great troop, and his fame will spread far beyond Europe. So, of course, great troop being his, army, and his fame spreading out being, everything that he was doing during those times.
So, in a nutshell, these small little poems, these 4-line poems or whatever, are like, so you take that what you just said about, because that was Hitler, obviously, and they're saying that because of that predicted Hitler, and like that was, so what he said was true then.
Yeah, we're gonna get into that. So like there's a lot that goes on with like what he originally said versus what was translated, because I believe it was written in like, was it like an old French or like a different language basically that was a bit difficult to translate during those times.
Because Old French is even a lot different than modern French. Like it's almost like illegible compared to modern French.
Right, it's like Latin versus Spanish. Yeah.
So essentially, a lot of these prophecies that he predicted and everything like that, technically they may not be necessarily true because of the interpretation of the language is completely different.
Yeah, that's one of the debates among scholars that we're definitely going to talk about momentarily. But yeah, that's
Okay.
definitely one of the things that just is like it's questionable as far as how accurate his statements were, just based on the fact of what was said. Because a lot of what drove controversy with what he said was how like cryptid or how enigmatic it was that he said, because a lot of times wasn't clear cut.
Well, that's like me saying like the sky will turn dark 100 years from now, and then like that might happen, and then it's like, oh, he's a
Right.
pro, like he prophesized this. And that's what I almost feel like a lot of these, a lot of prophecies that he had come up with, because even doing a little bit of research on it and everything like that, it was just like he was throwing darts at a board. To me, that's what it almost seemed like, because there was like it wasn't just one prophecy that he'd come up with; it was multiple ones. So
Oh
if
yeah,
you
it was a lot.
and that's the thing is like if I were to say 100 different things might happen in the future, well, maybe one out of that 100 will happen. That doesn't make me, it doesn't make me like I can predict the future and everything like that. But
Well, like, what's his ratio?
yeah, exactly. It's just a ratio thing.
But what is
Yeah.
his ratio? Because we know a couple of the ones that they say are true. How many? How many did he come up with? Like, what's the number of just general?
693, I think it was.
Holy cow!
I would hope he's right a few times, man.
No, I think no, I'm sorry. Let me reiterate it. 6,338 is how many prophecies
Oh
he was told to have written.
my gosh!
All right.
Yeah, and some of them were actually debunked. Like he had quote unquote predicted the Challenger explosion, where it was reported that 9 would perish when it was actually only 7. I know still a lot of people, but another one was the death of Princess Diana. The poem he wrote for it was God the Last, but first the nickname of Nostradamus of the 90s. Takes the goddess of the moon for his day in movement, a frantic wanderer and witness of God's law, and awakening the world's great regions to God's will. So they claimed that the goddess of the moon is supposed to be Princess Diana because of some reason. And then Trevor Reese, who was a survivor of the incident, his last name Reese, Rees, spelled backwards is seer, which is of course another name for a prophet. So that's like somehow that connects to that. Yeah, like, it's a lot of like, this connects to that, and
I think why he said Princess Diana is related to goddess of moon because Diana is the Roman version of goddess Artemis, and Artemis is the goddess of moon. So I think that's how it's connected. Or maybe I'm thinking too much into it.
No, that's a great connection.
that might be the same kind of connection that they may have made
I
back in
should be
those days too.
interpreting prophecies then.
Yeah, right. We all should be.
Right, just interpreting things how we want.
Well, I think that's such a hard thing too. Is like he's not directly saying Princess Diana is going to die.
Yeah.
It's not that. It's a poem. You have to interpret it. You have to decipher it. And I feel like in that sort of sense, I mean, granted, like I guess a lot of the poems he did say though, I mean, they did turn out to be true. But again, we were saying he's over 6,000 different poems. One of them has got to be true eventually.
Yeah, but they're vague too. I mean, the one about Hitler, like that could mean just about anything.
True.
I mean, and it also refer to like Napoleon because that's a similar kind of deal, right? I mean, he was pretty poor and worked his way up, and then kind of wreaked havoc over all of Western Europe.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, you can't really say outright whether this one is for this specific incident or this one is for that specific incident.
If he says Hitler in any of his stuff, then you've got me.
Right.
Like,
And that's something too. Is like, it's just so the interpretation of it, and that's almost like you can do that with like a lot of stuff, like even like paintings too. Is like what like every single painting, like just because the painter, is like, this is how I feel about it. Well, it's a painting, it's art. You can interpret it any way you want to. In poetry, that's a type of art. So how you interpret that, it's up to you in a way. So
I found another reference to Hitler as well that I thought was interesting, and it goes, "The major battle shall be close by the Hister, Hister. He shall cause the great one to be dragged in an iron cage, while the Germans shall be looking at the infant Rhine." Now, obviously, you think Hister, that has to be a reference to Hitler, but in actuality, it's like that's just another name for the lower Danube River, which he was close by. So that's where, they kind of blur the lines between, that has to be Hitler. Like, not really.
Yeah.
Yeah, but at least that one is more specific to like Germans versus the first one wasn't. It was just Europe.
Right. There was another one that he had made about 9/11, and it goes, Earth shaking fire from the center of the earth will cause tremors around the new city. Two great rocks will war for a long time. Then Arethusa will redden a new river. Now, a lot of people would interpret that like new city as in New York City, two great rocks as in like the war that went on after 9/11, and, Earth shaking fire being the explosions.
That is, I don't see it. I'm sorry. Like I don't. I don't see that as him predicting 9/11. Now, if he were to said like there's two great pillars that fall from something in the sky which creates havoc in the Middle East, like okay, all right, I can see that, but I don't. Maybe I don't understand his. Again, like Old English and even I guess French is. I don't know. I don't know about this. I don't think he's a. No, I don't
And
think so.
that's part of the debate. It's like that could be anything. And did he even say that? Because again, a lot of what was stated, a lot of what was translated may have been misinterpreted or may have been written wrong to fit whatever agenda the person that was writing the translation wanted it to fit.
True.
Prophecies have their own vagueness. So, if it is a fulfilled prophecy, I mean, it can be explained as coincidence also because it's so vague, it can be anything. You can relate it to anything. That's what I think.
You just wait enough time, and of course, it's going to come true.
Right. And that's the
Yes.
thing about it too. Like he himself never referred to himself as a seer. He basically observed events of the past and wrote about it and was like history repeats itself. So something like this is bound to happen again and again. And that's where this whole idea comes from that he had said himself. Like, I don't predict the future. I just write about what has came to pass and what will likely happen again.
And didn't he use like wasn't so we were saying or you said that he was an astrologer and he did some other research too to come up with these predictions, correct? Or I guess like these things that he would write about.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. Like he also received a lot of criticism for that as well for his astrological observations because he had no like formal education on the subject. Just like with his medical degree, like he got kicked out of medical school, but was still doing medical practices with like the plague and everything. So that's where like it's like, is he as reliable as a source as he makes it out to be?
What are your guys' thoughts on that though? So like now this is kind of getting off subject and everything like that, but if someone is, studying to do medicine or like do medical work, they do everything perfect, but then they fail that last test but yet they still practice medicine. Do you think they're justified or do you think that's okay for them to do that? Or do you think no, they have to take that last test to actually, help people?
Well, if they were doing surgery on me, I would hope they'd finish the last part.
Right.
Okay.
But another interesting thing that is brought up is that there are claims that he had predicted, what's going on now with the pandemic.
Oh boy,
Haven't heard these
Let's
ones.
hear the poem about this.
So the poem that was written is there will be a twin year in parentheses 2020 from which will arise a queen Corona who will come from the east China and who will spread a plague in the darkness of night on a country with 7 hills that they claim is referring to Italy and will transform the twilight of men into dust, which of course means death. To destroy and ruin the world, it will be the end of the world economy as you know it. Now, there's no actual proof linking him to that claim, and it's also important to note that the plague was big during that time. So just like he wrote about things that happened before, he had at least 30 to 35 plague prophecies. So any one of those could have stick and been like, oh, this is reporting the coronavirus, this is reporting the Zika virus, this is all kinds of outbreaks that happened. Like, no, it's just he wrote about what was going on at that time and kind of just worded it, a few different ways as a possible future.
That's an interesting coincidence with Italy, though, because it makes sense. A prophecy around that time period would reference Italy because it was still a fairly central point in the Mediterranean, like that Western world. But I don't know, it's just kind of funny that they at least do mention Italy, where with the coronavirus, that was a huge deal for like a month. Remember that?
Oh yeah.
I don't. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
when like
It's
Italy
it.
was falling apart, you don't remember that? Like that was like every
Uh-uh.
day for like a couple of weeks because like there was the worst outbreak in like one
Yeah.
of the western areas was in Italy. And there's that whole like YouTube video of all like the mayors staying like saying "stay the fuck home." Like
Wait,
Yes.
was
you
this
don't remember that?
2020?
This
Was
is
it
2020.
2021?
This is 2020, like
Yeah.
mid 2020 that summer.
Oh, so like this was at like the height or like when it first kicked off?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Okay,
before like
so
everything got shut down.
okay, yeah, my memory is for shit. So like, yeah, I'm gonna go back. I'll look at it and everything like that, and it'll probably jog my memory. But no, I don't remember that. Like Italy was on fire.
Oh, was it on fire? It's just like they had the worst spikes at the time. It was like before it hit New York real hard.
Okay. So what other things did he predict? Did he like? So let me think of some. You said the the Challenger, the explosion, correct?
Yes.
Do you have that poem of what it actually says?
Let me see if I can find it. But I know there was that one, and there was like a few others that were like debunked because of a few details that were off, like with maybe the amount of casualties or the year it was supposed to happen, or even the location. And another big thing, like we mentioned before, is the mistranslation and misinterpretation of a lot of what was said, because a lot of scholars during that time, and possibly even now, like trying to translate old French to, more modern translations, it's like it could get mixed up, it can get misinterpreted, there might be something missing, or they might just add on their own things just to make it fit more of whatever they're trying to sell.
That's true. That's true.
Just trying to find the prediction. All right, so I found it. So it says, in the mission of the first blue star, a child of the Holy Land among the seven shall perish. As the ship descends heaven's sky, the lone star be scattered with wreckage.
Can you say it one more time?
Yeah, I need another one of those.
Yes, so it says, in the mission of the first blue star, a child of the Holy Land among the seven shall perish. As the ship descends heaven's sky, the lone star be scattered with wreckage.
So I thought you said that the interpreter the poem had 9 and not 7.
So I think they switch them up because this is actually like they report this as like a phony Nostradamus prophecy
Oh,
that
okay.
they kind of just threw out there. Because that's another thing that's like a common issue is like a lot of people will come up with something and then throw it on the internet and say, "Hey, look, this is a Nostradamus prophecy about whatever event that's going on at the time."
Mm.
It's a problem with Ben Franklin too. Anytime someone comes up with like a smart quip or something, the joke is you always say that Ben Franklin said it first, so it sounds legitimate.
Yeah, it's a common problem with like scholars and people of before. It's like because it's not as well documented, you could just say, "Oh yeah, he said this," and everybody's gonna believe it, especially if enough traction is gained with it.
So he was born in 1503. He only lived 60 years, correct?
Yeah, lived to be about 63 or so.
63. That's just crazy to think that like people are connecting stuff that, was 500 years old almost.
Right, and that's the crazy thing about it. It's like it's been that long, and yet people are still bringing it up or trying to connect, all these different things. And I don't know if it's just to gain notoriety or popularity, because a lot of these people will publish books with reported, Nostradamus prophecies, and of course make money off of it or gain popularity with it.
Mm-hmm.
So what exactly led him to make the prophecies? Because you said he was a doctor first, or like was almost a doctor, but you said he was still at least helping out with the plague. What exactly prompted all of this?
So, from what I've gathered and what I can tell, it was really just him making predictions about the future based on past wars, past events. And his idea was that history repeats itself all the time because of how many wars have happened, how many outbreaks there have been. So he's just decided, to release a whole bunch of different poems that can or cannot connect to different things that may happen in the future. Like there's undoubtedly going to be another, from 1503, there's undoubtedly going to be like another war, potentially another outbreak of some kind of sickness, and so on and so forth. So of course at that time he decided, I'll release these books or release these poems out and just let them be.
Was it something that like he was telling people that he was writing all this stuff, or was it was it jeez, was it oh, when he died, then did they find this stuff? I don't know why I can't talk.
I think he had released it out like you would any book at the time, and to just kind of have it out there. And I guess like as time passed on, as he was no longer, with us, people picked it up and started, of course, translating. Was like, hey, I can do something with this. I can make this something real popular.
Mhm.
And so they, grab these cryptic, poems and be like, oh, this has to refer to aliens, and this has to refer to Hitler, and this has to refer to Napoleon. Like, nah, this could be anything.
I just wonder his motivation for writing it all down. Like, was it stuff where he was plagued by like dreams, or is it just stuff he was coming up off with like off the top of his head? I know that's what got to me curious is why he felt the need to publish these things or write them down. Because I mean, that's not easy in that time period. Most people couldn't write, let alone know how to publish something. So I'm just really curious about the motivation.
Yeah, I think it was just him basically telling of events that has already happened and kind of just like basically writing like a history book, but in the form of poems, from what I can see, what I can find.
Just writing a history book like poems, then people misinterpret it as tellings of the future.
Yeah, pretty much like a complete
It was just like, I was just
misunderstanding.
trying to write some poetry, man. Like, stop.
Yeah, because you got to remember too, this was during like the Renaissance. So like if people were doing all kinds of crazy stuff, writing all kinds of different things and coming up with all kinds of inventions and releasing it to the public. So I guess he just thought, I'll go ahead and add to that collection because he was like a scholar too. He did a lot of studying and things like that, and had studied a lot with astrology and tried to be a doctor and everything. So I guess he just thought he needed to go ahead and release a book for himself.
So how did he die?
Now that I haven't been able to find, I don't
He
know.
died of gout, which had plagued him. So
Oh,
Oh man, not
yeah,
gout.
Is gout that foot thing?
I have no idea.
Whoa. What? Well, hold on. Let me look at what a gout
I
is.
think gout is like a major inflammation thing.
Yeah, inflammatory
And I think
arthritis.
that turned into edema, and that's how he died.
Okay.
Yeah, I think he's definitely one of those like interesting characters that people popularize just because of how fascinated people are by, prophecies and possible events of the future. Just like this whole scandal with the 2012 and the end of the world and the Mayan calendar and everything, how everybody blew that out of proportion and was just becoming so excited about the idea. Not excited in the good way, but more so excited in the sense of like, oh my gosh, mass panic and mass hysteria about the world's gonna end and all this craziness. It's like it's just a misunderstanding of the knowledge that the people possessed back in those days.
Well, wasn't it just that they just stopped making the calendar, and that's kind of like why the calendar ended? I thought I heard that somewhere where like it was like just because like they just made the calendar up to 2012 and or something like that, and then it was just like no, they didn't make anything past that.
If I understand correctly, that's where it starts over. And I think it's like it records a giant passing I think in our galaxy. Like it's like a 27,000 year cycle or something. And it has to do with some cycle of our planet within the galaxy. I'm pretty sure that's what it was because they were just obsessed with astronomy and they just love tracking the cycles of stuff because they thought it meant something. It doesn't, but I mean, if a cycle is 27,000 years long and you kind of figure out like how it works, you'd probably base a lot of stuff around it too.
Yeah, and that's what I heard too.
Talking about space hurts my head. We can't talk about space too much.
Those big numbers, they hurt, don't they?
100. Ow, my head. So to me, Nostradamus, he doesn't seem like he was much of a, telling of the future. It was just, I feel like what you were saying, like he just wrote things that had happened in the past, are bound to repeat themselves again. He probably put a little bit of spin, a little pizzazz on some of the poems too. And like what you're saying, people are just like kind of grabbing at stuff, trying to make things fit. And then again, with the whole old French, it's like, or it was not used anymore. trying to interpret it, you can get lost. And you can do that. Like even now, like even, I mean, like Ro, I'm sure you can kind of contest to this, but like, are some words that we use in English just not translatable into Indian?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Simple, okay.
Or like, yeah, or like even some sayings. Like, is there anything that, like a saying that we have in English that just like does not translate at all?
You'll have to give me examples, Alex.
What about, let's see here, kill two birds with one stone?
Yeah, there's one in Hindi, "Ek teer se do nishan." So
What does that mean?
that means you kill two things with one arrow.
That's really close. That's
Okay,
cool.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, let me give you a harder one then. Shit happens.
Oh,
So I mean, yeah, and that's just the thing. Like that's my take on this guy, is that like he was just spouting some stuff off, and like we said, 6,000 poems. One of them has got to stick, or something's got to kind of fit that piece of that puzzle.
yeah, I mean, if
So
you look at the prophets, they do end up making a large number of prophecies. So definitely there's a chance of at least one prophecy being correct.
It almost feels like, so the Renaissance was the rediscovery of the classical era, because there's that Dark Ages after the collapse of Rome, and then after that came like the Middle Ages, and then you got the Renaissance where they were rediscovering the classics, and a bunch of people learned how to read. And now remember, like a lot of those classics, like we've even looked at, like the Iliad and the Odyssey, they're giant long poems. It almost feels like he was trying to write history just in poetry form, because that's what was popular, because that's what the Renaissance were. So he could like be a Renaissance guy. So he could be a historian and a doctor. 'Cause that was their whole big thing, is they could be multiple things. And then he just wrote like a shit ton of poetry that got misinterpreted and mistranslated later.
do you think it's one of these things where he wanted to be like known for something, and that's why he did all of this stuff?
I wouldn't doubt it. I mean, if you're smart enough during that during that era, I mean, why didn't he just stick with just being a doctor? I'm sure he had plenty of work, like during the middle of the
True.
plague. Like he probably wasn't bored. So I think he was just trying to. I don't know. I could be completely incorrect, but I bet to an extent he was trying to make a name for himself. But I don't know if he meant to make a name for himself the way that it happened.
Yeah, I can agree to that because I haven't found any sources that even say like he called himself a prophet or anything like that. So I think, like you said, I think he just wanted something out there to, gain a bit of popularity himself, but he didn't expect it to explode the way it has, to where he's like, oh, like, have you ever heard of Nostradamus? He's a world-renowned, prophet, seer, and predicted the future, and he told about this event and that event.
That's almost like us making this podcast, and then 500 years from now, they're like, "Oh, this is the most accurate, up-to-date
Oh my God.
information on that we have of any recording ever. This is the most accurate." So, I mean, that's very loose, but it's
It reminds me of an idea that I've heard of, like, how like TV signals and radio signals, they kind of just go on for infinity. So it's like if like an alien stumbles across like one of our, TV frequencies, they'll look at some sitcom and that's what they think. I think we talked about it before, but like that's what they'll think that the Earth is like. It's like the 60s sitcoms and old school radio shows.
imagine if it picked up something like a zombie movie. Like, what the heck is going on this
Oh, we gotta
planet?
go down there.
just, yeah, just there's people eating people.
Right.
Well, do any of you guys believe in any prophecies, like generally? It sounds like from Nostradamus, most of his stuff is pretty loose from what we can tell. But are there any ones maybe connected to his or just in general that just have you going, oh crap, yeah, that seems real?
So something that my wife and I were actually talking about today, because I was telling her about the podcast that we're about to do, or that we're doing right now, is that the whole 2012, that the world actually did end then, and we're all like in limbo, or we're in like a computer, like like the Matrix simulation thing. Like that would be cool if that were the case. I mean, like it's kind of weird to think about, but like it seems that like 2012, 2013, like in that general area, just everything was just like, just there really wasn't a care in the world, like everything to me at least, like was, just fine. But like nowadays, like 2020 to now, 2022 has just been like chaos and everything. Like it's just crazy. I would like to think that the 2012 thing actually could have happened and everything, but obviously we're still kicking it here. But as far as other prophecies go, I don't think there's any out there that I know of that like I believe in per se. So and I'm not really like, again, like the poems that Nostradamus made, you can interpret those a million different ways. So I don't know. I as for me right now, I don't think there's really any sort of prophecies that I believe in.
I always liked the 2012 one because I was like graduating high school around then. So it was just like a really interesting thing that like I had a friend that was super obsessed with the zombie apocalypse happening then, and he got super into survival gear and shit. And yeah, no, he had like one of those big army backpacks, a bunch of knives and stuff, and he was just like, "I'm prepared for the zombie apocalypse. It's happening on 20." He was obviously joking, but it was just kind of a hobby he developed out of the fad of it.
Mhm.
But I mean, I know what you mean. It does feel like there is this weird like tipping point at around that era from like 2008 to like 2014 almost, like where just things started to kind of get a little weirder every year. And I don't know, I almost think it has more to do with just the way we share information since then, because 2012 was like at the boom of people utilizing honestly like the internet just on a regular basis, because it was used before, but once it like was in the palm of your hand, which was really starting around that era, I feel like just everything kind of took a shift. And I don't know if they were like somehow any of that is ever connected with how those prophecies worked or that time frame, or if it's just a huge coincidence. But it does feel around that time, societal shift did kind of happen.
Mhm.
We're just not realizing it till 10 years later because you don't realize things are shifting when they're happening, right?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, but what you were talking about earlier, Alex, it kind of reminded me of like there's a bit of a side tangent here, but I think it's called quantum leaping, to where basically like if something happens, like a near death experience happens, you like I guess your soul kind of like shifts into another dimension where that incident, or you survive that incident, so like you continue on like a basically like a in a video game where you die and respawn, in that same checkpoint or same area, and you kind of just keep going with your life. And I think that's probably what happened worldwide on 2012. It's like we might have very well have had like a serious incident, but then we kind of just like, oh, respawn, level up, whatever, new life.
But there's the one hero of the movie that remembers what happened and he's all
Right.
sulking now.
Uh, what about you, Ro? Is there any sort of prophecies or anything like that that you believe in?
And I do think that prophecy has aspects of psychology. It's got nothing to do
Mhm.
with magic. And that's what I believe. Maybe there is. But I think it's got a lot to do with cognitive, because cognitive psychology actually breaks into, or kind of researches into pattern forming and attention to the formation of prophecy in modern day society. And while that is the person who is predicting it, the person who is receiving it can also be kind of self-fulfilling the prophecy, because again, when they receive the prediction or the prophecy, they end up expecting something, and expecting that thing to become true. And because the person believes in it or anticipates it, and probably the person's behavior will align to fulfill the belief, is what I believe. And one of the examples, while I was researching, is that I came up with is, I don't know if you guys came across this name because she's quite famous, Baba Vanga. She's from Bulgaria. So in around 1970s, there was this Yugoslavian actress, Silvana. I'm not going to pronounce her last name because I do not want to mess it up. So Silvana Silvana met Vanga when she was on a tour in Bulgaria, and it is said that Vanga did not even look at her and sat facing the window with her back towards Silvana. And they just didn't speak to each other. And after a while, Vanga told her Do not pay. I do not want to speak with you. Go and come back in 3 months. So Silvana got up and started walking towards the door when Vanga called out again and said, wait, you will not be able to come. So go now. And if you can come back in 3 months, do so. So Silvana took this as a confirmation of her death. And she eventually died 2 months later in a car crash with her sister. She was with her sister in the car.
I've never heard of Baba
Vanga.
Thang. Yeah, I've never heard of her before.
I mean, she was the one who. I mean, so she. There are four predictions that stand out for her. Two came true and two did not. So the most famous or infamous one was of the 1994 FIFA World Cup, where she predicted that two countries starting with the letter B will be playing in the finals. So, so while Brazil was one of the countries, Bulgaria lost to Italy in the semifinals. And the second one that she predicted, which thankfully did not come correctly, was World War III would begin in 2010 and end in 2014.
Oh.
So those were her major two incorrect predictions. Now, some of them claim that among the correct predictions was that she had predicted that the 44th US president would be an African American.
Okay.
And the second one was Silvana, but I think it was Silvana's fault that she decided that she would die instead of, not being
True.
around Manga or in Europe at all.
True. Yeah, to me it's kind of with all of these, all these people that say that they're prophecies, like, again, you say enough stuff, something's gotta stick. So I don't, unless someone is I guess 100% correct all the time and is very detailed with their prophecy, I don't. It's gonna be very hard for me to believe them. I don't know.
Yeah, it's like that cold reading thing, like they do with what's his name? The guy who like cold reads for ghosts.
Oh, you're talking about? Oh, it's John. Oh, what is?
Yeah,
John. Oh, let me look it up real quick. South Park makes fun of him.
yeah, that's the biggest douche in the universe. That guy. But it's like it's similar idea, because you're like almost cold reading the future, because you're just saying it vague enough that you can just fit about anything to it.
Yeah. Oh, what is it, John?
What? John Edwards.
John Edwards. Yes.
Fucking John Edwards. Yeah, that guy.
And it's crazy, like, now talking about South Park and everything like that, but it is how they break it down in that episode is, I feel like it's
perfect.
It really is, because one of the characters, is like, all right, does the name Fred mean anything to anybody? And then someone raised their hand, and then he's like breaking it down, like, all right, most people have like money issues, family issues, or like something else. And he's like, does the money sound familiar? And they're like, oh yeah, it is. So it's like, it's almost like with these, at least for John Edwards, he was picking very broad things, and he'd get like one or two things correct. And then he would be like, all right, well, they say hello and don't worry about stuff. And everyone would clap their hands and everything like that. I'm going to go back and watch some John Edwards after this. I'm really interested.
Well, I mean, yeah, with the prophecies, it just works like in a more broad way, because if you start reading those prophecies, they set up like a war, and it's like, okay, well, it matches this one, but not quite this one. Mm-hmm. But eventually there's going to be a war or a certain set of circumstances that are going to be close enough that you can just stretch it and then be like, well, it's poetry. So, I mean, it's not like completely literal.
True. Ro, have you ever heard of John Edwards before?
No, I haven't heard of John Edwards. So that's something that even I look up.
Yeah, he was, what year? It was like the early 2000s, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was around that time.
Yeah, early 2000s. This guy had like a talk show, like a stage that he would stand on, and then he would just not predict, but he would like talk to spirits.
Communicate with dead people.
Yeah.
He sounds like a mentalist, to be quite honest.
Oh, what?
That's exactly kind of what he is. Yeah, it's just he was like one of the first ones that got popular
Right?
with it.
Yeah.
But it was just cold reading. That's all it was.
And I don't think Nostradamus did any of that. So
No, but I think he kept stuff intentionally kind of broad, and I'd be curious what more the original stuff looked like. Just how different it is. I read a little French just because I took 4 years of it, but I don't speak it, so I can kind of read it. So I'd be curious what like the differences are and how that translation can change. Because I know there's a lot of stuff like that. I've heard that about the Bible, like the original like translation before it was translated to Greek is a lot different. And I've always been curious, like what specifically is difference in the nuances of it.
well, yeah, it's funny that you bring that up too, because yeah, again, like a lot of I feel like that happens a lot of the time. Is like just it constantly is changing. Like you look at anything, what would be a good just look at the like English language, you know, like we don't use like the and what's another? That's the only word I can think of because I'm an idiot. But we don't use the anymore, so I don't know. It just things are constantly changing. So yeah, it would be really interesting to see actually what the original text like was like. Maybe all right, if any of our audience members are French and would have some Nostradamus material that they'd like to read to us, that we would greatly appreciate it.
Yeah. To add on to that, I do agree. I think like with a lot of ancient texts, like you said, with like one thing I heard about the Bible specifically is how like there was no letter J in the original language. So it's like, where did J come from? You know, it's like, it makes you wonder, like, what did they change and why did they change it? You know, like for what purpose? Because like there's like a whole bunch of different versions of the Bible. I know the most popular one that people talk about is the King James version, and there's this thing that I heard where Shakespeare was actually like he had a part in editing and rewriting the Bible. And if you turn to some specific pages, can't remember the specifics on it, but like there's certain pages where he put his name like Shake and Spear on like 34 and 37, which was like the year he was born or something like that.
No,
Yeah, look it up. It's crazy.
I
I've
don't
heard that
believe
one,
that's a
yeah.
Yeah, because William
conspiracy.
Shakespeare
It is
wrote
a
in the
conspiracy,
Bible.
but it's
William
a real conspiracy, is what it is.
Shakespeare wrote the. Oh my gosh, it's actually on Google. William Shakespeare wrote the Bible. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and like there's this whole thing where if you go to specific pages, like you see the last word is shake, and then another page, the last word is spear, and it's like, oh, that was the year he was born or the year he wrote, well, quote unquote, edited.
Speaking of the Bible, there's a lot of stuff like that where it's like you have to have like almost a key to it. And like if you go to this page and then this page and then this page and this specific word on this line, I've seen stuff about that with the Bible where there's like hidden messages in it, like predicting the future based off like where you look into it.
Right. And that could very well stem from like, confirmation bias or just people putting two things together that really don't fit. But if you squint hard enough, and hold your head back a little, it might make
You can
sense.
see the ship in the picture.
Right.
Well, there's I forgot what painting it is or who did it, but there's supposedly a UFO in the background.
Oh, I think I know what you're talking about. Yeah. Yeah. There's a couple of those too where it just looks like there's aliens in the background and shit.
Oh yeah.
Saint. Oh my gosh. Oh, this is gonna be hard. I'm gonna try it though. Okay. It's Madonna with Saint Giovannoio. Oh my gosh, that's so Giovannino.
Giovanni.
Oh my gosh, why can't I can't speak. Giovanno. Okay, that makes sense. But yeah, in that painting, there is what looks to be a spaceship in the background.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
Oh yeah, it totally looks like one. Yeah.
I mean, it is an interesting object to have in a painting.
Especially with the hyper detail there in like the rest of it.
Right. But it's also like how they discover what appeared to be helicopters and like spacesuits and also alien UFOs and like hieroglyphics or rock paintings and stuff like that.
I always find it weird how like some, I don't know, maybe it's just what like stays from old art, but just how rudimentary it can kind of feel. I don't know if like it takes like that much training to draw stuff at least more proportional, but it feels like a lot of stuff that's old, it just does, the proportions always feel off. Do you ever notice that? Like they can have detail, but the proportions are kind of really weird, like from ancient societies, or like if you look at European art from like the 800s to like 1200s, that weird where everything's like their faces are all long and stuff. You ever notice that?
Yeah, I know. I know what you mean. I think it might just have been maybe the material at the time, or just the way they might have painted back then.
I don't think their paintbrushes were like top of the line either. They probably had to make their own paintbrush. So like, they probably tried to make a circle and it turned out to be a square. They're like,
That's just how it looks now. Whatever.
Right.
Your head is a square.
Also, coming back to the letter J, so I and J were used interchangeably to express the sound of both the vowels and consonant. So in 1524, um, let me not mess up the name, but Gian Giorgio Trissino, an Italian Renaissance grammarian known as the father of J, made a clear distinction between the two sounds.
So then my question is then his name is not, so I guess for in the Bible, is his name not Jesus then?
It was Yeshua, as per Hebrew, is what I know. Um,
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Really?
yeah.
Did everyone know this? Am I just learning this for the first time?
Apparently.
Oh my gosh. I need to get out. I need to read more.
Yeah, because in
Ah.
the Hindi translation of the Bible, because we have people practicing Christianity over here as well, in the Hindi translation, Jesus is called as Yeshu.
Sounds about right. Because correct me if I'm wrong. Isn't Hindi a derivative of ancient Sanskrit?
Yes.
And then Sanskrit comes from the Indo-European language, which is also the mother language of all European languages. So like, there's a lot of weird vowel stuff that happens
Yeah.
between Hindu and most of the Western languages, where even though the words are drastically different, a lot of the way the vowels and consonants are used end up being the same, just because they came from the same place. I think it was from Crimea, if I'm not mistaken. That's where the Indo-Europeans originally came. And then their language
Yes.
just split and changed in weird ways over the continents, so it made everything be pronounced strange.
And a lot of English words have been picked up from Sanskrit as well.
Well, English
Yeah.
is just weird because it's both Indo-European language, like from the Romance side and the Germanic side. So it's like two languages that split and then came back together later, and then that's English.
It's a very bastardized language.
Yeah.
It really is, though. I mean, it takes things from everything else and then mushes it together.
I mean, they changed the name of one fish that we found that we find exclusively in Bombay, India. So just I mean, I know I'm just moving away from the topic, but I thought I'd just bring this up. So during the British rule, um, there was this one train that used to bring all the postal service letters, etc. And since it used to come from Bombay or go from Bombay, it was called as Bombay, and then dak, which means post. However, in that same train, we used to also get fish. There's this one particular variety of fish. If you can Google it, you will find it. Um, and the Britishers just named it as Bombay duck. Now that's a fish, and now it's named as Bombay duck, DUCK.
Really?
Yeah, which is Bombay duck is actually Bombay Post, and they named the fish Bombay duck.
Oh my gosh.
That's an intense looking fish.
It is, but it's actually very tasty, and the thorns do not hurt you. You can just swallow it.
That's awesome. I want to try that. But yeah, look it up, Alex. Those things they have like this lower jaw that protrudes like really far, and it looks like it looks pretty scary actually.
I think I spelt it wrong because all I got was a picture of a seagull.
Dude, what's up with you today?
Oh my god.
Bombay. How do you spell this?
Bombay.
duck.
Bombay space duck.
Bombay. Okay. Okay, that's better. Yep, and it's not a picture. Oh my gosh, what? That does not look real.
Right? It looks pretty crazy.
And Ro, you said it's pretty tasty.
It is, and it's native only to the waters in and around Bombay.
Could you compare it to anything that we might know? Like, is it similar to a different fish that probably we'd have access to?
Wow, I will have
No?
to check.
I'm just curious
Well,
because
hold on
I'm
one
really
second.
interested in eating this now, so I need to know.
Yeah, but then
Well,
you
so
please
there's-
eat an Indian preparation if
Okay.
you're going to eat it.
There is something called Bombay duck that is dried.
Yes,
So
it's the same fish.
is it okay?
It's the same fish.
Does it taste
but
the same?
No, it tastes different because it's dried and the preparation is also different. So when it's dried in salt. So it's a little more salty, and
Mhm.
the preparation is more drier. This Bombay duck, you can fry it, you can make it into a curry, but the dried fish is kind of, you just roast it over fire and you can eat it.
Okay. I have not had breakfast yet, so we need to stop this.
this fish is looking delicious.
Yeah, I really want like a fish sandwich or something now. This is getting bad.
It kind of makes you wonder, like, what is our language going to sound like, 100 years from now? Like, what is our books going to look like to people 100 years from now?
You've seen Idiocracy, right? Where what the language turns into?
I have not.
You have, oh my God.
I mean, we
That's
have come
such a great
we have come a long way from Shakespeare. Have it, give it, die.
How did you come up with so many? And the only one that I had was the.
Then there's art, thou, and
Yeah.
shalleth.
No, but yeah, it's probably going to change a lot. And imagine 500 years from now, because people are still trying to. Because it was for Nostradamus, it was what 1950 something that like his book actually got like republished again or something like that. It was something like that.
Yeah, I think it was
wasn't
like maybe 10 or so years later they republished it.
It's probably going to change a lot. And like even so, let's take the for instance, I don't know what's an event that happened that's pretty significant.
Comic-Con?
The what?
Comic-Con?
Comic-Con.
It's pretty significant.
Besides Comic-Con. Yeah, let's just take 9/11 for instance or whatever. Like how that all played out and everything. 500 years from now, the whole story could change to where it's like, the two buildings, like the earth just shook and then they collapsed. Who knows? So in reality, things now, granted, like we have video evidence and like things like that, so they'll have a lot more to work with. But yeah, I think a lot of things will change in the future. And it's almost like the game Telephone. And I've brought this up so many times, is like just passing it from one person to another, just over time, things just change. But it's pretty crazy how that happens.
Can you imagine? I mean, the slangs that will be used. I mean, yeet, that guy was salty. And people will think salty.
Yeet. Salty.
Yeah, he was being extra.
So he was carrying around salt with him, like the seasoning?
Yeah.
There'd be so much
What
confusion.
exactly is
a-
happening?
Is a yeet a type of bird? What do they mean
Right.
by that?
They're throwing it like it's a
Why are they throwing these birds?
That has to.
or a dab, like a dab. What are they eating?
Oh. What's a dab? I don't know. What is a dab?
Like, how did a dab go from being like a small amount of something or like a dip to being a
Yeah.
whole move that people do?
I have no idea. No
Like-
clue.
I'm
I'm not hip. I'm not with it, so don't ask me.
I'm seeing this new word called sauce, which is a word. I mean, it's a slang version for the word source. I'm like, Where did sauce come from? Why is it sauce?
You know what's another weird one? Is the word smack. Like to describe something like good or like tasty.
What?
Like this sandwich smacks.
I thought it meant to hit someone. You
Oh,
smacked him.
I see what you mean.
No,
Or slabs.
I'm
It's
like, what?
slabs. That's another
Yeah,
one.
slaps, man.
Slaps.
It's
Is
like-
it slaps?
Yeah, like this food slabs. Yeah.
What does that even mean?
It's kind of like
Yeah,
well,
yeah,
think of
it's
it
like
from
so
like
good. Your taste buds.
yeah, or I always think of it like a music thing because that's big. Like when you're describing sound, like it kicks or it slaps or something like that, and that's a good thing because you want your music to slap, man.
It's lit. I don't know what's
I
lit.
hate that one. I
I do
hate
too.
that one, man.
Or
I remember when that
drip.
was coming out
No.
because I was still pretty young when that was happening, and I
Oh,
hated it.
Lit.
Nostradamus is lit.
Another one I don't like is drip when describing like a person's appearance. Like, oh, you got the drip on. Like, what? You got a leak going on?
What is it?
Like,
How did that one come about?
I don't even know. I mean, swag was okay. Like, you got swag. Like, okay, whatever. But drip, come on now. That this is just getting out of hand.
Well, like saying like you got some good threads or like your threads, like that makes sense because like clothing's made out of thread.
Right.
Like okay, but drip, what? Maybe we're just all getting old.
I guess.
Oh
I don't
God,
know.
yes.
Sorry if you're really young and you're listening to this and we're just like not connecting with you. It's not that we don't like you or anything like that. It's just
No disrespect,
I don't know.
but, you know.
Well, that's like groovy in the 70s. How did that one come about?
Because I listen to groovy music, man. I don't know.
No, because now you're using the same word, groovy.
Or like hip. It's like I guess you groove, move on the dance floor. I don't know.
Yeah, a lot of that was connected to like that whole hippie music scene. Just you use a lot of weird words to describe like sounds and visuals sometimes because like especially when they're abstract, you got to kind of come up with different words to describe them. And I think that's kind of where it came from in the 70s. You got that kind of more groovy music, or you got just all the psychedelic visuals. You kind of needed more specific because when you say the word groovy, like you instantly think like tie dye and like shit like that. Like you just kind of have to. But like if someone says yeet or like lit or something, I don't have like a connection. There's no like you don't picture something. There's no aesthetic that really I see that goes with it as well.
I'm gonna look up where yeet came from. Okay, so it was the original use of yeet was a term for a dance, which arose about 2014, but was then transformed into an explanation for excitement or exuberance when throwing something
gosh.
such as trash into a trash can or making a shot in basketball. So it was a dance move, or there was a dance.
Or like flossing.
The floss
It's a
dance
dance
thing,
move.
yeah.
Yes, like oh my
I
goodness.
think there should be prophecies of what new teen slangs are going to come up so that we can just nip it in the bud. We don't really need more.
I'm going to come up with my own word and I'm just going to use it on the show. I don't know what that word is yet.
And today's not the day, Alex, for you.
I think today is the perfect day because I can't even talk anyways.
I think it's interesting though, because if you think about it, it's like it's true. The past is repeating itself. Because back then I think it was what the 90s, 80s. They had like dance moves that were considered different or like out of the ordinary, and like to the older generation, it's like oh that's y'all doing all these crazy moves and stuff. And now you come into like the 2000s, more dance moves coming out. That generation before them was like oh these dance moves are crazy, and now look at us. Kids these days are coming out with these dance moves and are like, oh, y'all are crazy. So it's like it kind of just repeats itself. It's like a repetitive cycle. Like as the generations go on and more things come out, it's like, that's just weird to us, but normal to them. And then what'll be normal to the generation after them will be weird to them.
And you know what you just did? We just came full circle with Nostradamus because he was just predicting the past would repeat
Yeah.
itself.
Unknowingly. Plot twist.
Well, I think we've pretty much talked as much as we could about Nostradamus and the topic of prophecies.
Yeah, I think we drained
Yes.
this out. Alrighty. Well, thanks everyone for listening in. Definitely keep an eye out for future updates as we release new episodes. My name is Leo. I've been your lovely host.
I've been Alex. I've been your other host.
This is Ro.
And this is Tristan.
All right. Thanks again for tuning in to That's Effin' Weird. Until next time, stay strange.